mocked his anniversary gift in the group chat. He left me speechless after finding out. The one bitter lesson that life has taught me about regrets is that you can't really do anything to change the past. No matter how desperate you are and how much you wish you could do something to change it, you will never be able to. Hello everyone, my name is Kathy. I'm 29 years old and I have lost the very best thing in my life just because I was so selfish. Yes, it's a man. My boyfriend of 6 years, Steve. He left me. And after my desperate search for him for over a month, I went online to see a proposal picture. Steve had proposed to a lady within a month of leaving me, and the shocking thing is that it's Debbie, a mutual friend of ours. I know I did something terrible, but Steve left me totally speechless after he found out what I did. He has done something even more painful than what I did to him, and I won't lie, it hurts real badly. I didn't think he would even see it. He wasn't supposed to even know I did something like that. But I was careless. I should have deleted those messages after sending them. I shouldn't have forgotten to lock my phone before going to take my bath that night. Or maybe I should never have even sent the messages in the first place. I kicked Steve's anniversary gift to me in the group chat my friends and I created a few months back, and Steve's response to the whole thing after finding out was just horrible. And the truth is, I wish it was only the mocking that I did. I wish I didn't even go further to elaborate just how different he was from Ryan. I wish my friends didn't send those laughing emojis encouraging me even further to type those horrible things that I did. I overdid everything, and I'm left with so many regrets. I almost cannot breathe. Steve and I met 6 years ago. It was lovely and cute then. Steve was macho. He was my exact type, tall and very handsome with a very nice set of teeth. I knew I had to have him the day he walked into the restaurant I worked as a server. He had been there with a woman that day. They were on a date, I knew that, but I didn't care. I wanted what I wanted, and I went for it. Flirting with Steve was fruitless. He was invested in the conversation he was having with that woman that day, and until he left, he paid no attention to me at all. Luckily for me, he came to the restaurant a week later, alone this time, and I was off my shift, so I changed my clothes and entered the restaurant like I was a customer there too, hoping Steve didn't recognize me as the waiter from the other day, and luckily he didn't. Held a conversation with him, and I was lying through my teeth to Steve, pretending like I was some hotshot model who was bored and wanted some more excitement. Steve didn't pay attention to the entertainment world, so it was easy to lie my way through our conversation, and by the end of the night I had his phone number and he had mine. We started talking, and from there, we hit it off, and it was just really great from the beginning. We started dating, and I lied about having some house issues, and Steve offered for me to live with him until I sorted it out. Well, technically, I did have house issues, but that was me living with my friends who also worked at the restaurant. Steve found out after 3 months of us being together about the job I really did, and he was really angry with me. He almost broke things off with me then, but I begged him desperately not to. Steve hates lies, and if he found out, he would get so mad and might even refuse to speak to that person forever. I knew that. I've always known, but yet I chose to gamble with the truth. He gave me one chance before, and yet I chose to do another stupid thing, perhaps thinking I will get another chance. And now I'm left not just heartbroken, but also empty and in pain, with lots of memories, both the ones we created together and the ones we were supposed to create together. After Steve found out about my job, he asked me to quit and go back to college so I could get a decent job, as I didn't go to one because of my financial background. I agreed just to please him and ease his anger towards me, but I regret it now. Maybe if I had been upfront with him from the beginning, I wouldn't have had to go to college or met the people I met and changed as much as I had done. Things definitely weren't the same for me after I got into college. At first, I was comfortable with going from home because Steve had no issues with driving me to school because it was just an hours or two journey depending on traffic, and he usually would pick me up again. On the days he couldn't pick me up, I took a bus or cab depending on what mood I was in. Steve gave me enough money to do anything I wanted or buy anything I wanted. So I should have been satisfied, right? Steve had even talked about marriage. But when I told home I wanted to be done with school before we got married, he agreed to it. So literally, he was waiting for me. He was ready to get married any time, but chose to respect my decisions regardless. The first year passed by peacefully, nothing too much. I made friends, and they were all cool people. We read together, and on days that Steve couldn't pick me up, I hung out with them until I felt like leaving. I thought that was all the fun school entailed until I met my current friends when I was in my second year. I felt like they were much more fun than my old friends, so I started ditching them and hanging out with my new friends. They took me to places I had never been before. I felt free, truly free for the first time. I wanted to try out everything, the drinking, the partying, the boys. Although that proved to be a problem when Steve started to notice the last hours I spent outside, instead of coming home early as I used to, and eventually I got tired of having to lie all the time where I was. So when my friends suggested that I told them that I needed to be on the school premises because the distance was getting tiring to travel every day, I agreed and did exactly that. I told him the excuse, and I also promised to go home every weekend. Steve didn't object and even gave me money to pay for my room. But I had instead gotten an apartment with my friends where all the fun was. We hosted lots of parties. We were literally very popular for the wild parties that we threw. I thought that I was having the fun of my life without having to bother about the financial aspect like I had to when I was still working as a waitress. I made different excuses to Steve not to go home on weekends like I promised, and when I feel like the excuses were already too much so that he didn't suspect me, I would go home and spend time with him. At that point, I really didn't feel guilty. I felt like I only had that opportunity to explore before I graduated and got married and settled down. I did cheat on Steve a few times, but they were just making out here and there at parties. A few dares and challenges from my friends. I didn't sleep with anyone. I felt like I owe Steve that much, but I basically did all the other stuff. I kissed a few guys, and then we would help ourselves relieve some sexual tensions, and then that was all. I never slept with them. But all that changed when I met him. Ryan. After my graduation, Steve helped me get a job, and I decided to go with it. The pay was nice, and work was pretty easy. I basically just gave the others on my team tasks to do, and when they're done, I look through it and then get to submit them to the higher-ups. Ryan happened to be the higher-ups I reported to. He was my direct boss, and at first, it was really just a boss-to-subordinate relationship we had. But I started to notice that Ryan paid more attention to me than was necessary between coworkers. It was in the way he would smile smugly when I entered his office, the subtle questions he'd ask about my relationship status, the way he would stare at me when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he complimented me and made me feel really sexy. I started to even look forward to his compliments every day, so I paid even more attention to my choice of clothes. Steve did also compliment my looks, though. But at those times, Ryan's compliment meant more to me. I liked the way his eyes would roam my body, and then the way he would lick his lips when I walked to his office. I liked all of it, and so when he flirted with me, I would flirt back, laughing stupidly at the jokes he made, adjusting my clothes in a way that showed off my assets and pretending like I didn't know that his eyes were on them. I would go to his office for questions I clearly knew the answers to, just so he could flirt with me again and make me feel good. I really just thought there was no harm in flirting with him. We kept going in between until he finally asked me out after only 1 month of working with him, despite already knowing that I was in a relationship because I told him that much, and he also knew I got the job through Steve. I told my friends about it because I was genuinely confused. I didn't know what to do, especially because he was cool with me having a boyfriend and sleeping with him. He told me he didn't mind as he himself wasn't ready for something really serious. My friends encouraged me to have fun since I wasn't still married yet, and I took their advice. I started hanging out with Ryan and then finally slept with him for the first time he invited me over to his house. He invited me for dinner at his place after work that particular day, and I agreed. I even texted Steve that I had to work late with my team and would be home late. Steve had offered to pick me up, but I refused and told him that I would find my way. Ryan and I left work separately and then met at an agreed location so he could drive me to his place. We didn't want anyone suspecting us together because it was against company policies to date a coworker. We didn't eventually get to eat dinner that day, even though all the ingredients were prepped and ready to be cooked. Ryan and I ended up using his kitchen's floor for something else entirely, and then eventually his bedroom. It was really wild. Sex with Ryan was just totally wild, and I was just so surprised at how much interesting sex could get when with another partner. Ryan was adventurous when it came to sex. We had sex in different places that were shocking to even think of. He was almost like he was always high on sex drive because of how ready he was to have sex anytime. His office desk became one of our favorite places to experiment with. Many times, I went home with no panties at all because of how turned on Ryan got when he got to tear them. And I didn't object to it either. It turned me on greatly when he behaved like a caveman. I did try to tone it down because I didn't want Steve finding out about it. I didn't want him suspecting anything. So when I had to go out to Ryan's place on weekends, I lied about spending time with my friends. They were also in on the plan. They knew I was sleeping with Ryan and were always so eager to hear how hot he was in bed. Because of how much time I spent trying to keep Steve out of the loop, and also trying to have as much sex as possible with Ryan, I didn't get to spend much time with them. So one of my friends had created a group chat, so we could talk as much as we wanted to about these things. I had even one time stupidly sent a video I secretly recorded of Ryan, and I having sex at his place to them just to show them just how erotic it was. My friend's response just encouraged even further. Whenever we did meet, all we had to talk about was Ryan. The girls would mock Steve for being less than a man, especially after I told them that sex with Steve was now so boring because I had had the taste of better. I laughed with them. I stupidly laughed with them, pushing down my guilt because I thought I was just really having fun. But soon enough, my fun got totally ruined and ended up in regrets. I almost got caught twice by Steve, and I escaped narrowly both times, and I was glad I didn't get caught. I was even starting to think that I was so perfect at covering up my tracks and even my mistakes until I did eventually get caught. The first time had been when Steve had gone out of town to visit his parents. We were supposed to go together, but I made up some excuse about work, so I didn't go. Steve went alone and was supposed to be there for 3 days. I was at Ryan's place having sex and going to work, and then back to his place to repeat the cycle. But Steve came back home earlier than expected, and when he called me the evening of the second day and asked where I was, I told him I was home. Steve told me he was home and I wasn't. I quickly left Ryan's place in panic and went home that night. I lied to him that I had been at my friend's place and we had too much to drink, and I passed out at their place, but I didn't want to tell him that because I felt like he would be disappointed. I even called one of my friends and pretended like I wanted to inform her that I was back home and safe. Steve believed me and said nothing about that matter again. The second time that Steve had almost caught me was when Ryan had insisted on coming home with me that day from work. Steve was supposed to be working overnight at his office, so I felt it was safe. I had planned that Ryan would only spend the night and then leave very early before Steve got back that morning. But Steve had gotten home earlier than expected, and Ryan and I were still in bed, sleeping naked with the blanket wrapped around us. Luckily, I woke up just in time to hear his key turn in the door, and I quickly woke Ryan up to hide him in the closet, and I pretended to have gotten up early to arrange the room, which in truth was my plan to hide Ryan's clothes as he was naked in the closet. Ryan spent the whole morning in that closet because Steve was home, and there was no way I could sneak him out without him knowing. Luckily, Steve was called in from work because of some issues with the report he submitted, and he had to go to rectify them. That was the last time Ryan ever came to the house. We only ever had sex in the office or at some hotel when we were both too horny to get to his house and then at his place. And I thought I was playing it safe. There was no way Steve would suspect me because of how careful I was being. I spent enough time without Ryan without choking our time together, too. But even though I was careful, my sins did catch up with me in the end. It was our 6th anniversary coming up. I knew Steve was going to do something special this time. Usually we always just had dinner at home or at some fancy restaurant. Nothing too special, but I just knew it was going to be different this time. Perhaps because of the way he kept talking about the anniversary and telling me to get my hair done and also a new dress. I knew something was up. I knew he was planning to propose. I could literally see the signs, and I really didn't want that. I mean, I did want to get married to Steve, but I just didn't want it to be that time. Not that soon. I wanted more time with Ryan. I didn't want to be a cheating wife because it would feel totally wrong. I was enjoying myself far too much, and I didn't want that to stop. So I started to talk about how I felt I needed more time to boost my career before we got married. I told him that I knew that kids would definitely be the number one thing when we got married because of how long we've dated, and I wasn't ready for them yet. I wanted to put him off proposing because of selfish thought. I really wanted to have my cake and eat it. I wanted to still have Steve, who was a good man to have a stable family with, and also Ryan, who was definitely only good for making one feel good in bed alone, when our anniversary finally came. We did go to a fancy restaurant to eat and toast to better lives ahead, but I guess Steve hasn't thought of any other gifts apart from the proposal, which I had ruined with my mouth already, so he only gave me flowers and a bracelet. I gave him nothing. I myself had had no time to prepare a gift in between my affairs and work, so I just made sure that I gave him a good time when we got home. He slept off beside me almost immediately after the whole thing, but I wasn't sleepy, so I picked up my phone to share the juicy details of our evening with my friends. They both were online and excited to hear everything about our night. I told them about the proposal I ruined, and I told them about the anniversary gift he ended up giving me. I jokingly called it a charm bracelet, like the ones they would sell by the roadside, and not the expensive golden bracelet that had my initials carved in it. My friends, as expected, had laughed. They mocked his gifts with me, and then we shifted again to our usual topic of Ryan. I talked about the new exciting style of sex he taught me, and how obsessed I was getting with having sex with him. I even told them that I slept with Steve as his anniversary gift, and instead of satisfying me, it made me miss Ryan even more, and that I couldn't wait to see him the next day at the office. I slept off while chatting with my friends that night, and the next morning, I woke up rather late. Steve was no longer on the bed, so I assumed he had already left for work, and probably didn't want to disturb my sleep thinking I would be up before time. I took my phone and replied to my friends' messages first, and then hopped into the shower so I could just quickly bathe and then go to work. But to my utmost surprise and devastating horror, when I got back into the room, Steve was holding my phone in his hand, and the expression on his face was a mixture of anger and disgust. I just stood there watching him. I didn't know what to say. There was no getting out of it. It was obvious that he had seen what I had texted my friends. He must have read through everything. He said nothing to me and silently went to the closet and packed a bag. It was only when he brought it out that I realized it was my bag he packed. He wanted me to leave. I was panicking and I started to cry and beg for forgiveness, but Steve wasn't listening to me. He just packed everything of mine and kept stuffing them in that bag angrily, and when he was done, he pushed both the bag and I outside his house. There was no amount of begging and crying that got Steve to listen to me. He just locked the door after pushing me out and then was out a few minutes later, and without paying any attention to me who was standing by the door and crying for forgiveness, he entered his car and drove off. I had to take my things to my friend's place and begged her to help me leave it there for a few days until I could come get it. She was hesitant, especially after hearing everything that happened. She didn't want to be a part of my misery, even though she was a big part of it from the beginning. My other friend, after hearing everything, started to totally avoid me. I was literally on my own. Nobody wanted any part in it. The next day when I went over to Steve's apartment to seek him out again, Steve wasn't home. In fact, the house was locked and his car was gone. The same thing happened the third and the fourth day, and for over a week too. Steve had just disappeared. He wasn't home, and when I tried to look for him at work, I wasn't allowed in or even told where he was. I called his parents, but both of them just ignored me totally. It was obvious that they already knew my sins. I felt so ashamed of myself. It didn't help matters that I was fired exactly a week after that morning that Steve had found out. Apparently someone had submitted anonymously that Ryan and I were going against company rules and we were both fired. Ryan blamed me for everything. He kept cursing at me and warning me to stay away from him. I cannot blame him. I have myself to blame totally and completely. If I hadn't agreed to his request or reported him for insubordination if he continued pestering me, I wouldn't be here writing and wishing I had a second chance to redo things. The most painful thing was that no matter how hard I looked for Steve, no one was willing to tell me anything until I saw that picture. That picture where he was on his knees in a restaurant with a ring on his hand and Debbie standing right in front of him smiling and crying at the same time. Overall, my state of mind has not been the same since then, because I keep wondering how they had met and how fast things had gone between them, so much so that he was already proposing to her. Words cannot express just how deeply I regret everything I did. There's no getting over what I've done. I will probably spend the rest of my life wishing I could relieve the past and get the ability to undo my wrongs, and knowing that I can never do that makes the pain even worse than it already is,